Hello everyone, welcome to Break a Build. On today's episode, we're gonna look at how to build this enclosure for the 3D printer I got. Long story short, I needed a part which was 3D printed for the project I was doing. Instead of buying the part like a sane person, I bought a whole printer. While doing the print, I realized I need to maintain proper temperature so the ABS plastic will not, deform. And I realized I need an enclosure to do that. And while looking at enclosure, I figured I would like to have all the remote access capabilities and automate some other things. So, on this episode, that's what we're gonna do. Let's get rolling. Alright guys, so this whole 3D printer enclosure and door started up by me looking up N54 walnut blasting, not the adapter which I was looking for later. N54 walnut blasting, and if I go to the shopping list, I needed one of these devices. I already have the air compressor, so that's okay, and walnut. So these two items I could source from Harbor Freight locally, so it's not a problem. The only other part I needed was the adapter, which I could not source locally, or I had to buy online. And if you look at most of the listing, it's all 3D printed except for this one off where it's made out of metal. And let's be realistic, you're probably not going to use it more than once a year. So anyhow, once that stuff is 3D printed, I figured, I'm like, if they can sell 3D printed stuff, maybe I could just get a 3D printer. So I went to, as everybody does, I went to YouTube and looked up 3D printer. Ended up looking up 3D printers. There's a whole bunch showing up, and I'm like, oh, that's great. And then I just went there and looked at some cat videos, cat versus printer, and I spent a couple of hours on these, and then finally I'm like, okay, let's look up 3D printers. And if you go to the list of items there are expensive, and there are some which is not that bad, like this Ender 3, which is like $160. It's not a bad investment if you're trying to do some prototyping or trying to build something, try on creativity. Anyhow, I ended up getting the Creality 3D Pro, which was $209. I believe I paid the same amount, maybe less, I'm not sure. This goes on sale sometimes. So I got the printer, I started printing the part. I started with printing ABS, and with my makeshift installation of silver foil did not work, plus my desk looks like crap with all the stuff I had nowhere to put because of the printer. So when I started looking up DIY 3D enclosures, IKEA lac tables came up front because it's readily available and it's like $10 a piece. Usually it's like 15 to 10. I bought 3, so I figured I could use the spacing between each other to store stuff. Bought some L brackets, screws, and some cabinet hinges. I got the plexiglass as well, it's cheap these days, and this plywood which is coated in black on one side, and it's like $10 a piece, so I bought 2 just in case. Once I got the extensions on, I figured I'll just do a test fit to make sure everything fits fine, but unfortunately the tolerance was too close. It was only like half an inch between the printer and the table, so I had to print new extensions. While we're doing that, let's look into making the printer remotely accessible and automation. So I'll be using OctoPrint. It's a pretty user-friendly software. It's easy to use, easy to set up, and there's quite a lot of support in the community for this software as well. And I'll be specifically using a Raspberry Pi, and I'll be setting up with OctoPrint. They actually have a Raspbian image, and they call it an OctoPi. Makes sense. So they have instruction on how to install and set up a Raspberry Pi with OctoPrint and make it an OctoPi. If you have any confusion, you could follow the video instruction and set it up as well. OctoPrint is a feature-rich software. It's basically all the plugins. So if you go to the plugin repository and if you have something in mind you want your 3D printer to do, quite sure you'll be able to find a plugin which does that, whatever the feature you need. In my case, I'm mainly using 3 plugins. One of those is the TPlink plugin. So TPlink plugin works with the TPlink smart plugs. These are the tiny thingy majiggy devices. I bought on Amazon. They had 2 for $15 deal, so I bought it. I actually recommend getting 2. You could actually get away with just 1 by using both the OctoPi and the 3D printer on the same brick, but I recommend using 2 because if your OctoPi is on and it's connected to your 3D printer through the USB cable, it'll kind of send like a ghosting power. In my case, the 3D Pro creality is actually, the LCD is lit if the OctoPi is on. So I have 2 different plugs, one separately just for the printer and another one for everything else. To set up the TP-Link plugins, you could just go to your OctoPrint UI and go to the TP-Link plugin manager, and then you could set up certain functionalities with, like, if your printer bed hits a certain degree, you could make it tell it to turn off, or you could tell it to turn off when it's done printing or if it's sitting idly. And it's pretty useful if you're not around and you don't want your printer to be on all the time. You could use this. One of the other features is you could actually keep an eye on the printer by just connecting a webcam to the Raspberry Pi or the OctoPi. It's the same thing. So the other plugin is Pushbullet. I use most of the time my prints take hours and I'm not always around, so when it's done printing it just sends me a notification to my phone and I know it's done printing. And the other one is Spaghetti Detective. Initially, before I had OctoPrint, I had some times where the print gets messed up in between, in the middle, and it just keeps printing. It's basically just a waste of the whole print. I just wasted filament, time, and power. This is supposed to have an AI where it detects if it messes around and it'll stop the print. If you're trying to access your printer from home and if you want to upload a print, it's easy. Just connect to your Wi-Fi, just upload it from your phone, a laptop or device, and you could access and make it print. But the whole function of having remote access is being able to monitor and see what's happening when you're not at home. At that point, you do not want to open a port to your home network, which could be security risk. I would always recommend setting up VPN. If you have a newer version of an Asus router, I think they come with VPN client inbuilt, and depending on your router, maybe you have a VPN client. If not, you could get another Raspberry Pi and set it up as a VPN client as well. And there are multiple things. If you have an older router, you could always go to this site, DDWRT, and they have a list of supported routers, and you could upload their firmware to the router and set up VPN client from there. So there are multiple options, but I always recommend using a VPN to connect to your print from outside your home network. That's basically it. Just be careful and mindful what you're doing. And now let's go start setting up our OctoPi. So now you want to connect to your printer away from home. I would recommend using a VPN client. In my case, I'll be using OpenVPN, and here's the OpenVPN app. I just go to the app and then select the profile which I have set up already to connect to my network, and it allows access only to my OctoPrint to be connected. If you're at home, no big deal. Turn on your Wi-Fi on your device and connect to your home network. Mine is called Waffle House. I love waffles. Then at that point, you're just gonna go to your Casa app, and as soon as I find it, there you go, and turn on your OctoPrint itself. Like I said, I have set up my OctoPrint on a separate brick. That's because as long as the OctoPrint has power, it's gonna send ghosting power to the printer. I want to avoid that. Now my OctoPrint is booted. I'm able to access it remotely. So let's go back to my phone. Open a browser. Go to the IP address of your device. As soon as I go there right now, there you go. And that's my printer showing up, and I'm just gonna turn on the printer, and it should light up any minute. Okay, it's lighting up and the fan is turned on at this point. We're gonna go back to the phone now and set the printer to be home, call home function, and the printer is gonna do that right now. Ta-da! Okay, so to turn off your printer, it's the same thing. You just go to the app, turn off your printer first, and then you're gonna go back to the Casa app, and there you go, and turn off the OctoPrint. So like I was saying, that's the ghosting power on the LCD. As soon as I turn off my OctoPrint itself, it turns off. Here's my 3D printer enclosure. It's finally done. It took me a couple of weeks to gather some of the pieces and print some of the parts I need. I use Thingiverse. If you are starting off with 3D printing, Thingiverse is a pretty great site. There's a huge community of supporters uploading all kinds of designs where you could just download them and print yourself. And some of the parts I had to actually modify or design it myself. I used Tinkercad. It's a product from Autodesk. I believe it's tinkercad.com. It has a pretty great UI. If you don't know anything about 3D modeling or things like that, do not worry about it. It's just basic square boxes and circles and things like that. You just put together and you could assemble whatever the part you need. That's about it for this episode, guys. Thank you for watching. If you like the video or content, please subscribe, comment, and like. It helps out a lot. And I'll see you guys on another episode. As always, keep breaking bold.